ahead, Stephen.
Well, good evening, Rotarians and guests. My name is Stephen Rando, and I'm your MC for tonight's meeting of Rotary Melbourne. We would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri and the Bunjalung people of the Kulin Nation, and also pay our respects to elders past, present, and future, and extend that respect to all Indigenous Australians present today. Please note that all microphones have been muted for the duration of this presentation. Could we also please request that all accolades, comments, and questions can be posted via the Zoom chat function through the presentation. It is with great pleasure to welcome you to the 10th meeting of the Rotary Year and our monthly evening meeting. We are also pleased to make you all here this evening. What a treat under the enforced lockdown to welcome one of us, a very special guest this evening, Mary Jensen, who is the CEO of Empower Services, who is currently waiting online and will be speaking tonight on the power of positive thinking. Mary will more be fully introduced shortly by our chair, Sana Malik. In the meantime, please make them both welcome.
Thanks, Stephen. Mary is a human behaviour specialist and mindset master. She continues to train in the latest models and methods in changing the brain and human behaviour to assist her clients to be the best they can be. She works with CEOs and senior leadership teams to move through the blocks that are holding them back, allowing them to be successful and fulfilled. A keynote speaker in the space of perspectives and how we contribute to create the environment we are in, Mary teaches strategies to help us understand we have a choice about how we think about a situation, and in turn creating the ability to respond rather than react. Mary is passionate about driving change and enjoys working with individuals and teams that can be mentored and developed into high performance teams. She likes to empower people. Finally, she is a highly motivated individual with a strong focus on results, profit return and internal efficiencies, high attention to detail, and deadline driven. She has the ability to lead and inspire individuals and empower teams to improve performance.
Hi guys, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate you coming along to watch me speak tonight on the power of positive thinking, because I know that one of the things that we all have no fast commodity in is time. So I want to get started. I'll be a little bit interactive. Who here has ever been frustrated in their life? By show of hands. Yes. And I want to ask even more than that, who has been frustrated at home and taken it to work? Or been frustrated at work and taken it home? A story that comes to mind for me is, I'm not sure how many of you are parents, but parenting doesn't come with a manual, and it's a bit of a hard job sometimes. And our eldest daughter was wild between about 15 to 19. We were having a very difficult time. She was taking a lot of time off school, and I'd go off to work. I was running finance for a company, Gainsborough Hardware, and between 9 and 9:15, I'd be watching that clock to see if the school were going to ring me to say if she was there or if she wasn't. What did that do to my behaviour while I was watching that clock for that period of time? Anybody that walked into my office, I was a snappy tong. Who's been a snappy tong at work when something's in their mind and somebody might be coming in to ask the easiest of questions, yet maybe you don't behave in the best way possible? That's human behaviour. And we all have challenges in it, and we all have times when we do it really well, and we all have times when we don't do it really well. I want to do an exercise with us first so that we can get into a great space to be able to learn some strategies today. And this is the first strategy that I want to share. It's called box breathing. And box breathing is a method that the Navy SEALs use when they're in imminent danger. Their life is threatened. So if you'd like to join me, we'll do the box breathing and we'll do 3 rotations of it. So I want you to check in on your body right now. Check in on your neck, shoulders, your arms, your back, and see where there's some tension, where there's anything that's different, where there's anything that's relaxed, non-relaxed. And let's begin. We'll breathe in for the count of 5. Hold for the count of 5. Out for the count of 5. Hold for the count of 5. In for the count of 5. Hold for the count of 5. Out for the count of 5. Hold for the count of 5. In for the count of 5. Hold for the count of 5. Out for the count of 5. Hold for the count of 5. I want you to check in now and feel how much more relaxed your body is. The science behind it, and I'll talk about the science behind things quite a bit, because a lot of my clients love to hear about the science and not the woo-woo. And breathing could be labelled in the woo-woo space. But the science behind it is that it moves us out of our sympathetic nervous system back into our parasympathetic nervous system. While we're in our sympathetic nervous system, we're in our fear brain. COVID and a lot of the news about COVID is taking many, many people into that fear brain. And our fear brain is there to stop us from danger. The challenge with how the fear brain works is anything that it doesn't know or understand, it will put in the fear category. So the first time you ever saw a beautiful, cute, fluffy white rabbit, your brain said it was fear because it didn't know what it was. That's what it does. And we need to have a strategy to be able to move us back into the rest of our brain, out of that amygdala, the croc brain it's often called, back into our long-term brain where we can actually make informed decisions. The power of positive thinking. We get to choose how we think. We get to choose whether we're thinking negatively or positively. A lot of people think that it's automatic how we think, and that an action or a behavior or a thing out in the world creates negativity or positivity, that something happens and that's how we think about it. But it's not really true. What happens is something happens and our mind assigns a meaning to it. When we assign the meaning to something, that's when our body decides the feeling to attach to that meaning. So we get really to choose. If we can assign a positive meaning to any situation, then we can have a positive feeling in our body. If we assign a negative, then we'll have a negative in our body. What are the great things for thinking positively? Positive thinking helps us strengthen our immune system. Positive thinking helps us reduce anxiety. Positive thinking tells us that we can have more of those happy emotions like elation and joy and love and fun. And who wouldn't want more of those emotions in their life? I certainly do. A little bit about me. I'm Mary Jensen. I'm the founder of Empower Services. I moved out of home when I was 15 and started working as an accounting junior. So I didn't always have positive thinking like I do now. I became a finance manager by the time I was 20 and a financial controller by the time I was 25. I had a really crappy belief system at the time because I believed that I had to be hard to survive. I believed I had to work harder than any male to be able to have equal footing. And I believed that I needed to be better than everybody else to be able to do the roles that I did. And that kind of behaviour turned me into a ball-breaking bitch. Has anyone here seen The Devil Wears Prada? And I'm pretty sure that if you haven't seen the movie, The Devil Wears Prada, that you've had some sort of domineering manager in your life that yelled a lot. So that was me. I don't think I started out being a yeller, but as I got more busy, more stressed, and had many more deadlines at home and at work, I believed that I needed to yell to be efficient so that people would scurry and get things done more. I yelled so much at home that our cockatiel yelled Adrian Quick, which is my son, in my very loud yelling dictation. I don't know which way you say it. So I am now a human behaviour specialist and a mindset master. And how did that come about? When I was back in that ball-breaking bitch situation, I worked the last 8 years of my finance career in mergers and acquisitions. In those mergers and acquisitions, at one stage, there was 19 men in a boardroom and myself, and they said, you're a mum, you're a female, you have to have some nurture in there somewhere. You can start to meld the teams together. And I was like, are you serious? Me, of all people, there was many, many men in that room that had way more nurture than I'd ever associated with. So one thing I've always been really good at is gap identifying. Right from working from the age of 15, I was always looking at better ways to do things, filling the gap, finding what would work better, more efficiencies, more effectiveness, which led to a lot of the yelling. But I've always been that gap identifier. So I identified that gap within me in my skill set, and I started to retrain in human behaviour to better do my role in finance. It was about 18 months into that journey that I realised it was actually a personal transformation journey. In fact, one of my coaches said to me one day, what do you do for fun? What brings you happiness? And he still teases me today in a voice, I don't know how to have fun. I don't know how to be happy, which was exactly how I was living my life. I believed that to earn more money and be more successful, you had to work more hours. And for me, there was no more hours left in the day. My children were doing jazz, tap, hip hop, singing, and basketball. And I was running huge businesses, working 60, 70, 80, sometimes 100 hours a week if we were in the middle of a big merger or month end or year end. So it was really testing time. And I know that a lot of our education system and a lot of our parenting gives humanity a negative bias. So we tend to think about the negative things instead of thinking about the positive things. And because we run this negative bias that's kind of programmed into us in our childhood, a lot of the time it's difficult for us to swap from negative thinking into positive thinking. So I remember back in those times that I used to think disasters were going to happen. I used to be always thinking about problems, and I was racking myself all the time with negative thinking. And it caused me a lot of stress in my body. It pumped that cortisol into my brain. So if we move along to the next thing that I learned about what we see is not always what we get. So I had this negative bias going on. I remember one day driving out of our driveway, and I'm the coach, so you would think that I'd be the positive person, and my husband is not the coach, so you would think that he would be the non-positive. So we're driving out our driveway, and this is the house across the road from our house, and if you can see that black dot in the middle, our neighbours had put a camera on the front of their house. And I'm like, oh my God, is that a camera? Does that take the front of our house? Is that an invasion of my privacy? Can that see into my bedroom? Like, I was really freaked. Can that see into my bedroom? And my husband sitting next to me, Derek, he's much more level-headed all the time than I've ever been, which is probably why he was able to put up with me as the ball-breaking bitch as well. He says, yes, that is a camera. And isn't it good? It protects the front of our house. All the cars will be protected. At that point in time, if you had told me that I was going to ever have a different opinion about that camera, I would have told you were crazy. And I was what we call triggered by it. So I was having a negative response to that camera. Within 7 days, my son's car got broken into out the front of our house. And do you know what happened then? Straight across the road I went and got the footage. And of course, the police were able to identify who the thief was. So now I love that camera. And the funny thing about the camera is if you can see where that is, that's on the front of their porch, it actually takes the whole part of our front yard, but it has blind spots in their front yard. So it actually protects my property way more than it protects their property. And you know what? If they can see into my bedroom and they want to look at their camera seeing into my bedroom, then good luck to them. So sometimes when we see things, we take a different perspective. As the two gentlemen in this picture depicts very, very clearly, one can see a 6 and one can see a 9. And both of them are right. So sometimes when we want to think more positively about life, and we need to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, because what they're both triggered at the moment, arguing that what they see is what they see. You know, the 6 guy, he's arguing that he sees the 6. The 9 guy, he's arguing that he sees the 9. Both of them are right. Both of them can see exactly what they can see. So if we can try to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, then we can have a different perspective and maybe think a little bit differently and maybe diffuse any of that trigger. Pretty cute, huh? This is my first granddaughter. And if you're not grateful for what you already have, what makes you think that you'll be happy with more? You know, we strive to have more and more and more in this society, and we're not necessarily grateful for what we've got. Who would agree that success leaves clues? The most successful people in the world, we want to model what they do so that we can have their results. So if we look at Richard Branson, Tony Robbins, Oprah Winfrey, Steve Jobs, they all have a gratitude practice. They start their day with a gratitude practice. And I remember when I was retraining and learning about a gratitude practice, my gratitude practice was like this. I'm grateful for Derek, that's my husband. I'm grateful for Stephanie, I'm grateful for Adrian, and I'm grateful for Claire, my children. And I'll be grateful when this damn grateful practice starts to work. And I was writing a list. I was actually writing another chore list to add to my huge list of accomplishments that I wasn't going to get done in the day already. And it was frustrating me. I was doing a practice. I certainly was not being grateful. Now, what my grateful practice looks like for me is I open up my arms in my bed and I lie there and I go, I love my bed. I truly love my bed. I really love my bed. Who loves their bed? My bed is there for me every day. It keeps me warm. It keeps me cozy. It keeps me supported. Often when we get back from holidays, well, when we're allowed to get back from holidays, I'll jump into bed and say, I love you. And my husband will say, I love you too. And I'll go, no, I'm talking to my bed. So think of something in the morning that you can be grateful for. You know, it's not a one size fits all. Some people do get grateful from writing it down. They sit with their cup of tea and write it down. Some of my clients, they play with their dog for 5 minutes. They get that warm and fuzzy unconditional love feeling from their dog. One of my clients, he jumps in the shower and he dances around in the shower. And one of his biggest challenges used to be that he couldn't connect with his voice, that he remembered his dad being really, really successful and never being home from work. And he swore as he grew up that he would never be a dad like that. He said, now I've turned into my dad. I'm that same person. I'm at work at 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night thinking, damn, now I've missed spending some time with my boys. So he puts a song on and he dances around in the shower in the morning. And now his 2 boys come in, 2 and 4, and they dance around in the shower with him. And he says that he couldn't believe that he could put a practice in place that would take the same amount of time that he was already taking in the morning and very, very quickly bring him into connection with his sons. And so he can go off and be at work at the end of the day and not feel like he's ripping his family off because he's been present with his boys already in the morning. Another one of my clients, he's a photographer. He talks about his photography. Another one talks about his surfing. So find what it is for you. You will know that thing that whenever you think about, it brings a smile to your face. It brings a warmth to your body. When we can tap into something like that to start our day, then that powerhouses our absolute whole day. It brings me to one of the models that I work with a lot of people the most. It's what we call the cause and effect model. Has anybody here heard of that before? Yep, some. So in any situation, we can be either at cause or we can be at effect. And with the camera on the house across the road, I was the one at effect. I was being affected by the camera. My husband was the one at cause, looking at the positives of the situation, looking at the positives of the camera. Now, we're not always that way. I'm not always at effect and he's not always at cause because he had an incident. He was reversing out of the car park in Coles and he smashed my brand new Mercedes. It's about a week old. There was barely any damage and I went straight into grateful. I was grateful there was barely any damage. I was grateful we didn't have to get insurance involved. I was so grateful that nobody got hurt. And I jumped back into the car and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so grateful. And he's like, what are you grateful for? Like, I smashed the car. And he went home that night and he ruined that Sunday night. And he went off to work the next day and he came home and he said to me, I have had the worst day in my whole entire career. And I'm like, oh my God, you're still hanging on to the car accident. He goes, no, it's got nothing to do with that. But it does. When we have an incident that we're hanging on to, when we remain in effect, it affects our mind. It keeps us stuck. And he went on to have a really crappy week and a half. A couple of my kids put the cause and effect model on his chair. One of them stuck it on the fridge. Every time he saw them anywhere, he would rip them up and put them in the bin. And it was about a week and a half later, he sat in his chair and he started laughing. And I go, what just happened then? And he goes, it was my fault, wasn't it? I was reversing. And then it was gone. And that, that was gone, how he felt, and it stopped impacting everywhere he went and everything he was doing. And there's another story that I love to tell with this model. On the way to my daughter's wedding reception the night before the wedding, I was carrying the wedding cake in the back of a car, and I dropped the top tier off the wedding cake. And I'm like, chick, when you got a second, pull over. And she says, Mum, I'm not in the mood for your funny stuff tonight. And I go, okay, but when you got a second, pull over. And she's like, what have you done? Anyway, she pulled over. I picked it back up, put it back on the top of the cake. And it wasn't a disaster, but it did have big fingerprints in it everywhere. And she said, what are we going to do now, Mum? And I said, tomorrow I'll go to the cake decorating shop and I'll get some ribbon. We'll be able to put some ribbon around it, hide the fingerprints. No one will be able to see it. And I said, we've got 2 cake decorators coming to the reception. There's plenty of time between the ceremony and the reception. All good. So the next morning I get up and I go off to get the ribbon, and I'm at the cake decorating shop, and there's a figurine of a bride dragging the bridegroom. And as a joke, I took a picture of it and I sent it to my daughter. And she rings me, Mum, oh my God, that is hilarious. Get that. So I bought that figurine to go on the top of the cake. Now, they've been married 4 years now, and people are still talking about that figurine that was on the top of the cake. So if we're at cause, if we take full responsibility for the situation and we look to be solution-based, then we can have a very different outcome. If I had been the old me before I retrained, I would have yelled at her. I would have blamed her for me somehow dropping the top of the cake off. She would have yelled at me. We would have destroyed the night before the wedding. We would have destroyed probably the wedding day, and we'd probably still be arguing about it now. So this model is really powerful. So I've talked about the cause and effect, so blame and responsibility. When you take responsibility and you don't blame, you can have a fantastic outcome. When it was my husband not taking responsibility for the accident and laying in blame, he was destroying everything that he went on about. The next one that I love to talk about is acceptance versus judgment. I was working with a client. He's a catering client. He's the outsourcer in clubs and pubs and football stadiums and those sorts of things. He takes over the catering. And this particular club was bleeding money. So they brought in a brand new general manager. And that general manager, tough job that would be to turn a club around that's bleeding money. So he started to shut down different parts in the club. And my client was off his tree, ringing me up. I won't use the words that he used actually, but this not nice person strongly is ruining my business. And it was only one tiny part of his business anyway. But while we fixate on some big challenge, it gets into everything else we're doing, our businesses and our home lives. And he was really going, I don't like this guy. He's destroying my business. And so 3 weeks in a row, he was showing up and all he could fixate on was this guy ruining his business. So eventually I said to him, I don't know if you're leaving money on the table. He's very, very money driven. Many people are very, very money driven, and you have to tap into something that drives them to be able to facilitate making a change. So he's like, you can't weave your magic today and find a way for me to think that this is great. I'm like, okay. And then he's like, okay, what? And I'm like, so do you reckon this guy's got a really hard job? And he goes, yeah. And I said, so do you think people hate him everywhere he goes? And he goes, yes, they hate him because he's up. And he said, he deserves to be hated. He's just ruins people's lives, which is a bit over the tree. But that's how, when we're in the middle of something, we believe it's like 10 on the catastrophe scale. So I said to him, do you think he doesn't have many friends and that it's a really hard job for him to do? And he goes, yeah, but that's because he does stuff like this. And I said, I'm really curious. I wonder if he has a preferred supplier when he turns these places around. And my client was like, oh, wow, I didn't think you'd be able to change my perspective. And I said, do you think he has a preferred supplier? maybe you could change the way you're thinking about it and have an opportunity rather than being judgmental of the guy. And to his credit, that day he went into the guy's office and he sat down and he said, I bet you've got a really tough job. And he said, yeah, I haven't. He said, and I bet people don't like you everywhere you go. And he goes, yes, I believe people don't like me. And he goes, but I think you're one of them too. And he goes, yeah, I'll admit I was. And now they've become really great friends. And of course, now my client is the preferred supplier when he goes and turns these places around. So while we're at effect, we can't work opportunities. We need to be at cause if we want to figure out opportunities. Fear versus love. This is a fantastic one. If we're in fear about anything, then we can't be loving it. Can't be loving it all. And if you think of that example that I just used, my client was in fear of losing money. My client was in fear actually of losing that whole kitchen. And he didn't love on the guy at all. And I know that a lot of people think we don't use love in business. But if you work out things in your business that you love and that you bring that love side into business, then your business will thrive all the time. I'm watching the clock. So what have we talked about? How can I help you most? Give you the tools to go away today. Whenever we look at something and we've got a perception about it, can we see if we can change sides and put ourselves in the other person's shoes and perhaps look at it differently? Because when we can do that, then that diffuses any angst or any triggering that we have about any situation. When we feel ourselves triggered in any situation that comes about, when we feel ourselves triggered, if we do that box breathing exercise, it will relax our body. It will take away that catastrophe of a 10 out of any situation. It might not bring it down to a 2 or a 3, but it might drop it down to a 5 or a 6 so that we're not so blown away that it's impacting everything else in our lives. And if we think about being grateful, all the things that we can be grateful for in our life. I'm very grateful. This is my first granddaughter. She's very cute. She's 2 now and very, very funny. Other things that I love to be grateful for is the colour green. Sometimes in my morning gratitude practice, I just let my mind go wherever it wants to go, fixates on the colour green. There's millions and millions of colour greens, just like there's millions and millions of possibilities to solve any challenges in our life or any situation. And we can think about, are we at cause or are we at effect in any situation that happens? Are we at cause or are we at effect? And you know what? We're all human. I'm human too. Like the camera on the house across the road, I was at effect. The thing is, we're always going to be at effect or at cause. The thing that we want to work at is how long do we stay there, and do we let it debilitate ourselves? Do we let it destroy our home? Do we let it destroy our work? I remember that one of the hardest times that I was having at work, I was about the 10-year mark of my marriage. The kids were really little. I was running big corporations from a finance perspective. Back in those days, we didn't have the VPN. So when it was BAS day, I had to go into the office to do the BAS. I had to take kids in, often sick into the office to get something done and then go home for the day. Of course, later in my career, it was a lot easier. You could have a VPN line in and do your work from home. And now, pretty much we can do anything from anywhere. But I remember blaming my husband. I was not managing all the things that I had to do. I was treasurer of the parents and friend at the school, and I was treasurer at the kindergarten as well. And I was juggling all these activities. And I remember ringing my husband on the way to work one day, calling it quits, like, I'm out of here. I can't take it anymore. And I really, truly, at that stage, believed that it was his fault. I really, truly believed that he was ruining my life. Since I retrained in human behaviour, I now know that it was me. So any time we're in turmoil inside, we can easily look to the people close to us to blame them. But if we can bring in this cause and effect model and think, am I at cause here or am I at effect? Because I was definitely at effect and I was totally in blame blaming him for everything that was going on. And my life was never, ever going to improve while I was blaming him for everything that was going on. The only person that could change how I was feeling internally was me. And research tells us that if we're happier, if we're more positive, you know, that we reduce that stress, we reduce that anxiety, we reduce that cortisol that we're pumping into our brain all of the time. So I hope that I've given you something tangible to take away and use today. Maybe you've taken some pictures of the slides and that you can think tomorrow morning, what do I love when I get up, and start your day in a very positive mindset. And when the stuff hits the fan during the day, maybe use these breathing methods to reduce that cortisol and bring us out of the fear brain and back into our parasympathetic nervous system so that we can actually function. Because a lot of stuff is driving us into fear now. The political regime, all the arguments between people about which side of the fence they sit on about vaccines and not vaccines. And if we just breathe and think that every time there's a human being on the other side of the interaction, there's a human being there that feels fear themselves. And if we come with fear, then we're only going to make fear greater. But if we can put ourselves in the other person's shoes and see, oh my goodness, I can see you're 6 now. Oh my goodness, I can see your perspective. Wow. Isn't that interesting? And often if we can see more than one perspective, we can see multiple perspectives. And if we're in group work and we can see lots of different perspectives, we'll always come out with a stronger solution to any challenge that we have along the way. So I'm Mary Jensen from Empower Services. I'm a human behaviour specialist and a mindset master. Positive attitude gives you the power over your circumstances instead of your circumstances having the power over you. I've got a QR code there that's straight to our website if you want to know a little bit more about us and how you can change your thinking and have a different life and be positive. And thank you very much for being here and having me.
Thanks so much, Brene. I must say it's been quite easy to allow myself to feel a bit dejected lately, being in lockdown for so long. So after hearing you speak, I'm feeling much more motivated to choose more positive ways to think and respond to negative situations like this. So thank you very much. And I expect a lot of our attendees are probably feeling the same way as well. I see we've got a few questions in the chat, but before I turn to those, if I may, I'd like to ask you a couple of things myself.
Absolutely.
So I've been told you're a big basketball fan. So firstly, who do you go for?
Who do I go for? Well, that's a great question and difficult for me to answer. I actually follow Melbourne Phoenix in Australia, but I am also second to Melbourne United. Of course, I'm in Melbourne, so I am Melbourne. I've been part of Melbourne United in business for probably 5 or 6 years now, and of course Melbourne Phoenix is brand new. They're coming into the 3rd season now, and I am in the southeast, and Melbourne Phoenix are in the southeast. So I'm in both camps, but I actually follow the Melbourne Phoenix. And I'm pretty sure that one of my daughters might be on here as well. And if she heard me say that I didn't follow Melbourne Phoenix tomorrow, I'd be in big trouble.
So are there any athletes in basketball or otherwise you find particularly inspiring as role models for a positive mindset? Absolutely.
Daryl McDonald, I'm not sure how many people are familiar with Daryl on here. Daryl McDonald is from Harlem, so New York, and he, as a child, was shot at and in the worst possible situations, and he talked about his life being transformed by basketball. He's a real role model. He trained my son for about 9 years. He taught him a lot about values about life and work and not taking things for granted and how hard different people have it. He brought his children over. He's got 8 children. I think he brought his children over when they were having challenges in America and was a single dad looking after them all over here. I just think he's an incredible role model He was part of that Melbourne Tigers dream team back in the day, and my kids all look up to him. And I really thank basketball a lot for my background. My family background is alcohol and drugs, and I really believe that my children have stayed positive and healthy because of their involvement in basketball. So I'm always going to be grateful to Daryl McDonald. And also Andrew Bogut. Andrew Bogut comes from Dandenong as well. I'm from Dandenong, and I think he's a great role model as well for kids. He came from nothing and he worked hard. He got cut when he was 16 from the Dandenong Rangers, and he didn't give up. I think that there's a lot of stories about resilience and persistence, and that anything is possible when you put your mind to it and you stay the course.
Yeah, excellent. And while we're on the topic of sports people, I went to a webinar a few days ago on men's mental health by former AFL player Nathan Burke, and he spoke a lot about above and below the line thinking in the context of his role as an AFLW coach. And I wondered whether that's the same sort of concept as cause and effect.
It is
and
exactly.
That line you had on the screen is exactly
Yeah.
what he was referring to.
It is exactly. It's called the cause and effect model, or above and the below the line thinking. Yes, it is the same interchangeable model, and it is a fantastic model. And many people are sharing it. I can't believe that they don't teach these sorts of things in school.
Yeah, I think there is a big need there. I'll just turn to Philip Endersby now. Did you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Unmute. There we go. Right. The question I have for you, Mary, is that I guess there's an old philosophy that if you really want to, if someone really annoys you or gets right under your skin and you're the boss and you really want to give it to them, that you should really just take stock, sit on it for 24 hours. And if you feel the same in 24 hours, then give it to them. Is that a good or a bad philosophy?
If you're trying to grow a great business and you want to be a fantastic leader, do you want all your staff to be giving it to each other even when they think it's justified?
Never.
So, yeah, my answer would be no. And I really understand what you mean, because when I was that ball-breaking bitch back in finance, I was giving it to everybody all the time. And, my husband says to me a lot now, you could go back into finance now and be even more incredible than you were before. And I go, yeah, I could. I don't want to. But I now know that it was me. It was my perceptions and my thinking that was creating the way I behaved. I thought I had to be equal to or better than men. And I created all of that. And I know now that I created it because of a lot of things that had happened in my childhood. So it's pretty interesting if we learn a different way and we think about things differently. I remember that back in that time, if anybody asked me, is it more important to be right or is it more important to be kind? I would have said it was more important to be right, categorically. And I had to help everybody else be right as well. But now I truly, truly believe it's way more important to be kind. If you think about it, you've got an 85-year-old lady and she's not long for the earth, and she says to you, how do I look today, lovely? What would you say? Would you be right and say you look gorgeous? Or would you be kind and say you look incredible?
True.
Austin Burley, did you want to ask your question? Are you just on mute there, Austin?
I was trying to unmute from the tablet. Thank you. Thank you for that positive presentation, Mary. Certainly was very positive and I enjoyed it very much. I'm wondering, could you just reflect for us on a moment as to self-awareness in that process, please? And I know part of that self-awareness is that you're not putting yourself in the other person's shoes, but I think it's a wider story than that.
So it was about 18 months into my transformation that I started to think about the other person and no longer think about myself. I was driven a lot by significance and self-importance, and I thought that that was really what mattered in life. And it brings me to a story that happened to us very recently. My car got keyed, and my husband and I were together on the Thursday night when we noticed it had happened that day. And my husband flipped off about it. He's like, those blip, 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 how dare they? And you know, the severity of how he was responding actually physically hurt my body. Like, it pushed me back, the severity of his reaction. And I'm like, hey, you don't even know that person. Like, don't be like that. You don't even know who did it. And imagine the person that they have to live with, they have to get up and be with every day, that they felt that that was a necessary action of the day. So I now really automatically think about the other person rather than, and I was even blown away by my response that day. But it is, if we start to put ourselves in other people's shoes, we start to feel the world very, very differently. And it can open up great conversations, can open up great healing in families. It can open up fantastic cultures in business, and putting it into the schools. I'm associated with lifechanger.org, and we're starting to put this positive psychology and perceptions into primary schools and the lower levels of high school. The focus of that is to reduce teen suicide. So we're going in to the bottom, to the start, and try to give them tools to manage how they're going to move forward so that they won't have the suicide rate that we've got at the moment, because they need the positive. They really need to think positively about themselves and positively about the world.
Yeah, that's really fantastic, Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
Thanks, Austin. Great question.
We've got a question from Vadik. Are you able to take yourself off mute?
Yes. Thank you so much, Mary, for your wonderful presentation. I would like to say, I believe that keep smiling, because it's all about perception. So that's my ideology. However, I have a certain question for you. So if anything goes wrong for us, our first response is negative, and gradually it goes to positive, like it goes to positive. As you suggested about your new car getting bumped, your first reaction might be negative, but then it goes to positive. It does take a while. Further, when you are totally hopeful, like you would be having a positive outcome from your activities, your work, and those turn out to be negative outcomes, it does take a while for you to move on, to be on the positive side. So what would you suggest on that?
I absolutely hear you, and I do know that I used to be there, but I've totally changed how I look at things, how I respond to things, and how I react to things. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of Brene Brown. She's a great person to follow in America. She does a great TED Talk on vulnerability, and she has a wonderful way to look at things. She said that when things happen to us, we can treat them as our shitty first draft. You know, like when we were writing an essay back in high school, we would write a first draft and then we would rewrite it and improve things, and then we would submit a much better draft than the shitty first draft. So if we think about when something happens to us and the story comes up that's not positive, like I hated the camera across the road and I was furious about an invasion of my privacy, that was my shitty first draft. That was my first thought about it. And then I could rewrite the story. And yeah, I had a good experience with the camera to rewrite the story, but I've become much faster at rewriting the stories. Exactly like the example of the car being keyed. I didn't go to the negative at all. I went straight to the positive. I went straight to empathy for the person. So, you know, we don't go to the gym and exercise one part of our body. This is exercising our brain, and our brains were trained to that negativity bias that you're talking about, but it can be trained out. We can train our brains back to the positive bias. It
Yes.
is an effort to do it, and it is a process to train in. It didn't happen to me overnight. You know, I'm 9-10 years into my personal development journey now, but it will happen the more work that you put onto it. And the outcomes start to be much more positive. Life starts to be much more fun. And the more we do it, the more we realize. And then, of course, the more we do it. It's like anything. The more we practice, the better we get at it. And we can practice that negativity and keep that negativity going, or we can start to change it to the positive.
Yeah, and one more thing. I really appreciate your answer, and it is helpful. What to do about certain things? I do believe you need not to worry about things that are not in your head. But if those things are affecting you, how do you overcome that mindset? But I try to do that, and I have done a lot of times through the ignoring the hatred or the other's opinion, which is going to give you negative thoughts. I just ignore them, but they are not in my control. I know that, and I do try to think that, oh, it is not in my control, just ignore it. But sometimes they do get into your head. So how do you move on from that?
Can I ask a few questions?
Yes.
When you worry, how often does the worst thing that you're worrying about actually happen?
Like, I was worrying yesterday, and it did go. There was something I was expecting yesterday. It didn't go my way, but I was like, okay, something better is going to come my way. So I was really worried, and I was really hopeful yesterday, but it didn't go my way. And then I was like, okay, something good will happen to me, something better.
So that's a great way to look at it. Something better will happen. And I had an experience like that last year. The year of COVID is really mucks up all our timelines. I go 6 months ago, and then I realized, no, it was before COVID. So that means it's 2 years ago. But it was either last year or the year before. I was looking at doing a joint venture with some colleagues. And somehow, I don't even know what happened, I got left out of the joint venture. And I was absolutely gutted, like absolutely gutted. And I actually cried for about 3 days. And I couldn't believe it. And my husband is always on my shoulder going, you give too much away for free. You give too much away for free. You give too much away for free. And they took a lot of my IP. And I always say, I don't care if people take my stuff for free, because my focus is to help people change. And if I help one person change today, then it's a good day. It doesn't matter if I delivered it or if somebody else delivered it. The main thing is that somebody is able now to think differently about their life and have a better life. And so my husband's like, I told you. And I'm like, no, they're not going to change me. I still hold solid. I feel bad, but I still hold solid. Within a 6-month period, I got another global opportunity come about that I would not have been able to access if I had have been in the other opportunity. It would have been a conflict of interest. So sometimes when the bad thing happens and we make it bad by the meaning we give it, it's actually for a good thing. Yes. You know, I remember I was 21 and I split up with my boyfriend of 5 years that we were supposed to get engaged. And I thought that that was the worst possible experience of my life. But if I didn't split up with him, I wouldn't be married to my husband, who I've been with, we'll be married 28 years this year and together 33 years, and experience the incredible life that I got to experience. So when we're in those moments that we label bad or we think are disasters or caused us worry, often when we put some time between it and look back, we often say, oh, that was a great change in my life. So because we can do that reflection now and bring it back, when I'm in a painful situation, like even when that happened to me with those guys that took my IP, I knew that it was for a good reason. I said to my husband that day, I feel awful and it's gutted me, but I do know some positive will come out of this. And when we keep that mindset, we're looking for it. And then when it shows up, we won't miss it.
Yes.
Can I just add one more little thing? At the start, you talked about smiling. Yes. And I want to tell you the scientific research about smiling. When we actually smile, we engage about 200 or so muscles in our face. Those 200 muscles in our face send feel-good hormones up into the serotonin, up into our brain. So even if we're not happy and we do a smile on our face, we pump the good hormones into our brain.
Yeah, that's true. That's the reason I put on certain thoughts that come my way on my mind, and I always put down a line beneath that, as I always say, keep smiling. So that's my motto.
That's beautiful. Keep smiling. And you've got a beautiful smile too. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, unfortunately we're getting quite close to 7 o'clock, so we might have to go to just one more question. I see everyone's really interested and engaged with you, Mary, so it's a shame we kind of have to call it quits here, but I wanted to get Dr. Chris to ask his question because I thought that was quite an interesting one. And I apologise, I did not want to attempt pronouncing your last name for the first time on video.
No, that's fine. Chris is perfectly fine. Thank you, Claire. Mary, thank you very much. I'll tell you what's really interesting about today's presentation. I think we have engaged with you and have lived your experiences based on your communication style. So big credit to you for that. What happens often is that people undertake some sort of personal training, productivity, relationships with a particular trainer, and they get all positive, but their environment around them, their friends, their ecosystem, their employers, they're negative, negative, negative. So whilst they've come out of the session really positively, their environment's negative. How do you think that should be reconciled?
So with the gratitude practice in the morning, that when we walk into, so if we're going off to work and it's a negative environment and we walk in there already with the perception of it being a negative environment, we have glasses. So we put on these glasses, and the glasses actually are our filters of what information we capture. And we've got this thing called the reticular activating system in our brain, and that tells our brain what information to collect. So what we focus on is what we get. There's about 2 trillion bits of information falling all at the one time, but we can only pick up about 8 or 9 chunks. And of those 8 or 9 chunks that we're going to pick up, we have a filter system, like our glasses, to tell us what to pick up. So if we go into the environment thinking this environment is always negative, this environment is always negative, this environment is always, we will definitely find negativity in that environment. But if we get ourselves into a positive state, so utilizing the breathing and the gratefulness and thinking about all the things that you love, you've put yourself in that frame to start picking out the positives. And when you go into that negative environment, because you've changed that filter, you will actually start to see the positive things. And, I told Zach, my old coach, that I didn't know how to be happy and that I never had any fun. But now that I have a different filter of my life, I actually think back about times in my life and I've rerouted what I believed, because I can now see where I was happy and where I did have fun while I had that stress filter and looking for the disasters in life. I never ever saw it. So we actually have the ability. Has anybody here had the experience of they're about to buy a new car and they've decided, I remember this happened exactly for me, my first Mazda, and next minute I saw Mazda 3s everywhere I turned on the road. That's our reticular activating system at play. What we focus on is what we will find. So if we can change that focus, my daughter said it to me today, Mum, I'm putting on weight, I'm focusing on losing weight, but she knows now she's focusing on the weight. She needs to switch that and focus on healthy exercise. And when she does that, she'll increase being healthy and exercise, and then the weight will shift.
Great. Thank you very much, Mary.
Thanks for your question, Chris. It was great.
Now, just quickly, Mary, is there one thing people can do right away when they leave this webinar to begin their journey towards a more positive mindset?
Instill that breathing. Anytime anything happens, they talk about the power of the pause. And often in the power of the pause, people are practicing some sort of learnt breathing activity. And that's great. So instead of being on automatic pilot, start to pause in any situation, and then you've got more opportunity to respond instead of being reactive.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Mary. That's been a really interesting and inspirational presentation, and a really interesting discussion as well. So I'll just pass back to Stephen now to wrap things up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you again, Mary, for making us, I think, all Navy SEAL breathers and sharing your story. I think I took away the power of your friendly neighbour as part of that. So thank you again. Mary, we couldn't leave you without our gratitude of you. So we'll be sending you some limited edition R100 Centurion socks, 200% Australia made in Preston by one of our past presidents, Phil and Isby. Absolutely amazing. You'll love them. So they're on the way.
Yeah.
And just to close out, look, just a quick reminder that our club evening meetings this year will be led by the evening meeting team. Look, we're planning to have more of these evening meetings every second Wednesday of the month, and hopefully soon all our meetings will be in a hybrid presentation. And we welcome any suggestions of any other suitable speakers. Again, thank you, Mary, and I'll now pass on to our President, Reg, for notices and closing. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Well, what a night. It's turned me round, I can tell you. I have a couple of notices I just wanted to share. Firstly, congratulations to Bob Burgess. I don't believe he could be here today, but he's just completed 45 years of membership of our club today. Congratulations, Bob, for achieving that milestone. And another little clip of news that quite a few of us, I think, will be very interested to hear, and that is that our district, 9800, has let us know today that for the first time in over 3 years, they have scheduled the weekend of the 30th of April and the 1st of May 2022 at a mystery location to be our first in-person district conference in 3 years. So more details on that soon, but please save the date. And now in closing the meeting, I really want to say a huge thank you to our evening team, which George and Yidan have expanded rapidly, and Claire, who handled the Q&A, Stephen, who did the introduction and closing, and Sana, who also has played a great part in opening the meeting. Thank you, everyone. And Ari, who's always here and always working in the background as well. And of course, she doesn't include her name in the running sheet, but Joe Mavros, our ever-present office manager, has always put some enormous effort into the meetings. I must say, I'm delighted to see a group of new members stepping up and picking up the challenge of running the monthly evening meetings. Thank you, everyone. Next week, we have an interesting event coming up. It's a first in several ways. Firstly, the guest speaker next week is Professor John Thwaites, AM. He's a former Deputy Premier of this great state, but he's currently now the chairman of Climate Works Australia. John will be speaking on the progress of Australia against the UN sustainability goals, and I think we'll find that very interesting. And also on that day, he'll be presiding over the presentation of our first presentation as a club of an Environmental Sustainability Award. Well worth coming along and checking it out if you can make it. So I believe this will have very broad appeal to a wide range of people. So thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Thank you again, Mary. I think you've taught us some really interesting stuff, and it almost seems like you just can't be too positive. I've got a great fitting ending video that I'm going to roll in a minute, and I just want to add my thanks to Mary for the presentation this evening. So we're going to close this week with a song called Feeling Good. sung by Michael Bublé. So sit back for the next few minutes and enjoy and relax. And thank you for being here, everyone. Stay safe and be kind.